Marcus Chen sat quietly at the large round table, his hands folded in front of him. Around the table, alien voices grew louder and angrier. The Korthak delegate slammed his clawed fist on the metal surface, making the whole table shake. Across from him, the Veltar representative hissed through her breathing tubes, a sound that meant she was very upset. "The trade routes through the Omega sector belong to us," roared Thrakvel, the Korthak Empire's chief negotiator. His red eyes glowed with anger, and the spikes along his back stood up straight. "My people have used those paths for 300 years. "Your people are thieves and raiders," shot back Silvara of the Veltar Confederacy. Her blue skin turned darker blue when she was angry, and right now she looked almost purple. "Those routes pass through our territory. We have every right to charge fees for their use." The other aliens at the table watched nervously. Some moved their chairs back, ready to run if a fight started. The Korthak were known for their violent temper. The Veltar were proud and never backed down from a challenge. Wars had started over less than this. Marcus took a slow breath and spoke in his calm voice. "If I may suggest something," he said politely. Both aliens turned to look at him. They respected him even when they were angry with each other. "Please, Ambassador Chen," said Silvara. "We would like to hear your thoughts." Marcus had earned this respect over many years. When other humans came to the Galactic Council meetings, they often caused problems. They spoke too loudly, made demands, or threatened people. But Marcus was different. He listened more than he talked. He asked questions instead of giving orders. He found ways to help people solve their problems together. "Both of your people have valid points," Marcus began. "Thrakvel, your people have used these routes for a long time. That creates a right based on tradition. Silvara, the routes do pass through space that your people control. That creates a right based on territory." He paused and looked at both of them. "But perhaps we can find a solution that honors both rights." "Impossible," growled Thrakvel. "They want to charge us money for something we have always done for free." "And they want to use our space without paying anything for the privilege," replied Silvara. Marcus nodded. "I understand. But let me ask you both something. Thrakvel, what does your empire really need from these trade routes?" The big alien thought for a moment. "Fast transport of goods to the outer colonies. Time is money in trade. And Silvara, what does your confederacy really need from controlling these routes?" The blue alien considered this. "Income to support our border patrol fleets. It costs us money to keep the routes safe from pirates." Marcus smiled slightly. "Then perhaps the answer is partnership, not payment." He pulled up a holographic display showing the disputed trade routes. "What if the Korthak Empire provided escort ships for the convoys? Your vessels are strong and fast. This would help the Veltar by reducing the cost of patrol ships. In return, the Veltar could allow free passage for Korthak trade vessels." Both aliens stared at the display. The room was quiet for a long moment. "The Korthak ships would help protect our territory," Silvara said slowly. "And our traders would move safely and quickly through Veltar space." Thrakvel added, "Each side gives something they can afford to give, and gets something they really need," Marcus explained. "The Korthak give military protection, which they are good at providing. The Veltar give passage rights, which cost them nothing if the routes are already protected." The two aliens looked at each other. The anger was fading from their eyes. "This could work," Silvara admitted. "It is better than fighting," Thrakvel agreed. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus helped them work out the details. How many escort ships would the Korthak provide? Which routes would be included in the agreement? What would happen if there were disputes in the future? He asked careful questions and made helpful suggestions, but he let them make the decisions. When they finally reached an agreement, both sides seemed satisfied. They even seemed to like each other a little better. "Ambassador Chen," said Silvara, "once again you have shown us the value of human wisdom. Your people are fortunate to have such a skilled diplomat," added Thrakvel. After the meeting ended, Marcus walked through the corridors of Kepler 7 space station with some of the other alien delegates. The station was huge, built to house representatives from dozens of different worlds. The walls were made of a material that could change color to make different species feel comfortable. "I must say, Ambassador," commented Dr. Yexrin, a thin alien from the scholarly collective, "you continue to impress us with your approach to problem solving." "Thank you," Marcus replied politely. "It is refreshing," added Ambassador Hulmet of the Trading Guild. to work with a human who does not immediately resort to threats or violence. Marcus kept walking, but he noticed other aliens in the corridor nodding in agreement. "Your species has such a reputation for aggression," continued Dr. Yexrin. "The stories we hear about human military forces, their weapons, their willingness to fight. But you show us that humans can evolve beyond such primitive behaviors." "Indeed," said Hulmet. "You prove that humans can become civilized, given proper guidance and education." Marcus smiled and nodded, but he said nothing. He had heard comments like this many times before. The aliens seemed to think that he was somehow different from other humans, that he had overcome his natural violent tendencies through superior self-control or training. They meant it as a compliment, but Marcus always found it interesting how they talked about humanity. They saw humans as naturally violent and aggressive, and they saw him as the exception that proved humans could be fixed or improved. The truth was more complicated than they understood. Marcus was not less human than the soldiers and Marines who protected Earth's colonies. He was not more evolved than the engineers who built starships or the farmers who grew food on distant worlds. He was simply a human doing the job he was trained to do, just like all the others. But he did not try to explain this to his alien colleagues. It was easier to let them think what they wanted to think. As long as they respected him and listened to his suggestions, he could help keep the peace between their peoples. The next morning, Marcus received a message from the council president. There would be a special ceremony to celebrate the new agreement between the Courteous Empire and the Veltar Confederacy. As part of the celebration, each member species would display artifacts that represented their culture and values. Marcus thought about what Earth should contribute to this display. It would need to be something that showed the best of human civilization, something that represented humanity's growth and progress toward peace. He knew exactly what to choose. Marcus stood in the large exhibition hall, watching as workers from different species set up displays for the cultural celebration. The hall was enormous, with a high ceiling that could adjust its height to make tall aliens feel comfortable. Soft lights changed colors slowly, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Each species had been given a section of the hall to display something important from their culture. Marcus wanted to choose items that would show the best parts of human civilization. He did not want to display weapons or military equipment. Too many aliens already thought of humans as violent warriors. Instead, Marcus had chosen items that showed humanity's love of art, science, and peace. In the center of Earth's display area, he placed a small sculpture made by a famous human artist. It showed a child reaching up toward the stars, carved from white stone that seemed to glow under the soft lights. Around the sculpture, he arranged other items. There was a book of poetry written by humans from many different countries on Earth. There was a small model of the first spaceship that had traveled to another star system. There was a piece of music stored in a crystal that could play the sound when touched. But the most important item was the flag. Marcus handled it very carefully. It was not a military flag or a battle banner. It was the flag that had flown at the very first meeting of the United Nations on Earth, hundreds of years ago. Back then, Earth had been divided into many different countries that often fought with each other. The flag represented the moment when humans first tried to work together as one people instead of many separate tribes. The flag was old and fragile. Its colors had faded over time, and there were small tears along the edges where time had worn the fabric thin. But it had been carefully preserved, and it still carried the hope and dreams of the humans who had first raised it. Marcus placed the flag in a special case that would protect it while still allowing people to see it clearly. Next to the case, he put a small sign that explained what the flag meant. This flag represents humanity's journey from division to unity, the sign read. It flew at the first meeting where humans from all nations came together to solve problems with words instead of weapons. It reminds us that cooperation is stronger than conflict. As Marcus finished setting up the display, other aliens came to see what he had chosen. Many of them seemed surprised by what they found. "Where are your weapons?" asked Captain Zorketh of the warrior clans. "Where are the trophies from your victories in battle?" "Humans are known throughout the galaxy for their military strength," added Commander Velthus. "Surely you want to display something that shows your people's power." Marcus shook his head gently. "We prefer to show our people's wisdom," he said. "Anyone can destroy things, It takes more skill to build them. The aliens looked confused, but they nodded politely and moved on to see other displays. Marcus walked around the hall to see what the other species had chosen to display. Each exhibit told a story about the values and history of different peoples. The Courteous Empire had built an impressive display of ancient weapons and armor. In the center stood a massive sword that had belonged to their greatest warrior king. Around it were shields, spears, and battle axes, all made from metals that gleamed like silver. The weapons were beautiful in their own way, covered with detailed carvings that told the stories of famous battles. Thrakful stood proudly next to the display, explaining the history of each weapon to a small group of visitors. "This blade has tasted the blood of 1,000 enemies," he said, pointing to an ornate dagger. It was carried by General Morthak when he conquered the Seven Worlds. Marcus listened politely, but he felt uncomfortable with the focus on violence and conquest. He understood that the Courteous were proud of their military history, but he hoped they had other things to be proud of as well. The Veltar Confederacy had created something completely different. Their display was filled with crystalline artworks that caught the light and split it into beautiful patterns of color. The crystals seemed to sing when people walked near them, creating soft musical tones that blended together into peaceful melodies. Silvara explained that each crystal was grown over many years by Veltar artists. "We do not carve or shape them," she said. "We sing to them as they grow, and they form themselves into shapes that reflect the music we share with them." Marcus found the crystal art beautiful and calming. It showed a completely different side of the Veltar than their reputation as proud and stubborn negotiators. The Zephyri had created the most unusual display. Their contribution was a piece of music, but not music as most species understood it. The Zephyri could hear and create sounds in 11 different dimensions, far more than other species could perceive. They had built a special machine that could translate their 11-dimensional music into sounds that other species could understand. The result was strange and beautiful, like hearing the voice of the universe itself. When Marcus listened to it, he felt like he was floating in space among the stars. "This song tells the story of how our world was born," explained Whisper of Distant Stars, the Zephyri representative. "It begins with silence and grows into the music of creation." Marcus spent hours walking through the exhibition, learning about the cultures and values of the different species. Some displayed art, others showed scientific achievements, and some presented religious or philosophical ideas. As the day went on, more and more aliens came to visit Earth's display. Many of them seemed surprised by what they found there. "I expected to see human battle armor," said one visitor. "Where are the famous human starfighters?" asked another. "This is not what we expected from the warrior race," commented a third. Marcus patiently explained to each visitor why he had chosen these particular items. He talked about the sculpture and what it meant to humans to reach for the stars. He played the music and explained how it brought humans together across different cultures on Earth. He showed them the poetry and talked about how humans used words to share their deepest feelings and thoughts, but most of all, he talked about the flag and what it represented. "My people were once divided into many nations that fought each other," he told each group of visitors. "This flag represents the day we decided to try a different way. Instead of solving problems with war, we chose to solve them with conversation." Some aliens seemed to understand and appreciate this message. Others looked confused or disappointed. A few seemed almost insulted that humans would display symbols of peace instead of symbols of strength. As evening approached, Marcus made one final check of the display. Everything was in its proper place. The sculpture gleamed softly in the gentle light. The music crystal hummed quietly to itself. The poetry book lay open to a page about hope and friendship between different peoples, and in the center of it all, the old United Nations flag rested safely in its protective case, a symbol of humanity's choice to build bridges instead of walls. Tomorrow would be the grand opening ceremony, when representatives from all the member species would come to see the cultural displays. Marcus hoped that the exhibits would help the different peoples understand each other better and work together more effectively. He had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. The grand opening ceremony began at midday, when the station's artificial sun reached its brightest point. Delegates from every member species filled the exhibition hall, moving slowly from display to display. Conversations buzzed in dozens of different languages, and the universal translators worked hard to keep everyone understanding each other. Marcus stood near Earth's display, greeting visitors and answering questions about the items he had chosen. Most aliens were polite and seemed genuinely interested in learning about human culture. Some asked thoughtful questions about the poetry or wanted to hear more of the music. "The flag is very old," observed Dr. Yexrin, studying it carefully through the protective glass. "It must have great historical significance." "It does," Marcus replied. "It represents one of the most important moments in human history. The moment we chose cooperation over conflict." "Fascinating," the scholar said, making notes on his datapad. "And this sculpture represents human aspirations for space exploration?" "In a way," Marcus answered. "But more than that, it represents hope. The child reaching for the stars shows how humans always try to grow and improve, to become better than they were before." As the day went on, Marcus noticed tension building between some of the other delegations. The Korthak and Veltar groups kept giving each other suspicious looks, even though they had signed their trade agreement just days before. Old habits and old mistrust were hard to break. The problem started small. Some young Korthak warriors were admiring their people's weapon display when a group of Veltar officials walked by. One of the Veltar made a comment about primitive tool worship, not realizing that the Korthak could understand their language. Thrakmor, one of the younger Korthak warriors, bristled at the insult. His spikes stood up along his back and his red eyes began to glow brighter. "What did you say about our heritage?" he demanded. The Veltar official, a diplomat named Kalseth, realized his mistake but was too proud to back down. "I simply observed that truly advanced civilizations create art, not weapons. These weapons defended our worlds when your people were still hiding in caves," Thrakmor shot back. Marcus noticed the arguments starting and began to move toward them, hoping to calm things down before they got worse. But other aliens were also gathering around, some supporting one side or the other. "At least our caves had culture and learning," Kalseth replied coldly. "Not just violence and conquest. Your culture would not exist if warriors like ours had not protected it from those who would destroy it," Thrakmor said, his voice getting louder. The argument was attracting more attention. Other Korthak warriors moved to stand behind Thrakmor. More Veltar officials gathered behind Kalseth. The tension in the air grew thick and dangerous. Marcus reached the group just as the situation was getting out of control. "Friends," he said in his calm, diplomatic voice, "perhaps we should step back and remember why we are here today." Both sides turned to look at him. Some of the tension seemed to ease slightly. Marcus was known as a peacemaker, someone who could help people find solutions to their problems. "Ambassador Chen is right," said Kalseth, trying to sound reasonable. "This is supposed to be a celebration of our cultures, not a place for old arguments." Thrakmor snorted with disgust. "Easy words from people who have never had to fight for what they believe in." "And what exactly do you believe in?" Kalseth asked. "Violence, conquest. Taking what belongs to others?" The insult hit its mark. Thrakmor's face twisted with anger. "We believe in strength. We believe in honor. We believe in protecting what is ours. By threatening everyone else?" Kalseth shot back. Marcus stepped forward again. "Both of your peoples have noble traditions," he said carefully. "The Korthak have protected many worlds from invasion. The Veltar have preserved knowledge and art that might otherwise have been lost. These are both valuable contributions to the galaxy." For a moment, it seemed like his words might work. Some of the aliens nodded in agreement. The tension began to ease again. But then Thrakmor made a mistake that changed everything. "At least we do not pretend to be something we are not," he said, glaring at Marcus. "At least we do not hide our true nature behind pretty words and fake smiles." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his expression calm. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "Oh, I think you do," Thrakmor said, his voice getting nastier. "You stand there talking about peace and cooperation, but everyone knows what humans really are. You are killers and conquerors, just like us, but at least we are honest about it." The hall was getting quieter as more aliens stopped to listen to the argument. "Your people have destroyed entire worlds," Thrakmor continued. "Your wars have killed billions. Your weapons can turn planets into dust, and yet you stand here with your pretty flag and your peaceful words pretending to be civilized." Marcus felt every eye in the hall turning toward him. He knew that what he said next would be very important. "My people have made mistakes," he said quietly. "We have fought wars. We have caused suffering. But we have also learned from those mistakes. We have chosen to do better, Have you? Thrackmore asked with a cruel smile. Or are you just waiting for the right moment to show your true nature? The young warrior looked around the hall, seeing that he had everyone's attention. He was enjoying being the center of focus, enjoying the chance to expose what he saw as human hypocrisy. Let me show everyone what human civilization really looks like, he said. Before Marcus could react, Thrackmore strode across the hall toward Earth's display. His clawed hands reached for the protective case that held the old United Nations flag. No, Marcus said, but his voice was still calm and diplomatic. Please don't touch that, Thrackmore ignored him. He smashed the protective case with one powerful blow, sending pieces of clear metal flying across the floor. Then he grabbed the ancient flag with both hands, this pathetic symbol of weakness. He roared, holding the flag high above his head. Several aliens gasped as they saw how roughly he was handling the delicate fabric. Marcus took a step forward. That flag is very important to my people. Please put it down. Important? Thrackmore laughed. This is just cloth. Worthless fabric that represents nothing but lies and empty promises. With a vicious motion, he tore the flag in half. The sound of ripping fabric seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly silent hall, but Thrackmore was not finished. He threw the torn pieces to the floor and stepped on them with his heavy boots, grinding the ancient fabric under his feet. There, he said triumphantly. Now we see what human civilization truly amounts to. Worthless scraps that cannot even defend themselves. The entire hall fell completely silent. Hundreds of aliens stared at the scene, waiting to see what would happen next. All eyes turned to Marcus Chen, expecting his usual diplomatic response. Perhaps he would ask politely for an apology. Maybe he would graciously accept the insult to keep the peace, as he always did. Instead, Marcus went perfectly still. His face did not change expression. His hands remained at his sides. His voice when he spoke was still quiet and controlled, but something fundamental had shifted in the atmosphere of the hall. Something that made every alien present suddenly feel very uncomfortable, though most of them could not say exactly why. Marcus looked down at the torn flag lying on the floor, then slowly raised his eyes to meet Thrackmore's gaze. You seem to have misunderstood something, he said. Marcus walked slowly toward the torn flag. Each step seemed to carry weight that had not been there before. The aliens around him began to back away without really knowing why. Something in his movement, something in the way he held himself, triggered ancient instincts that whispered of danger. Thrackmore stood over the destroyed flag, still smiling with satisfaction. He was a Courteous warrior, bred for battle, trained from birth to fear nothing. He had faced down enemies twice his size and won. He had fought in space battles where death came from every direction. He was not afraid of one soft-spoken human diplomat. But as Marcus approached, Thrackmore felt something he had never experienced before. A cold sensation crept up his spine. His warrior instincts, which had kept him alive through countless battles, began screaming warnings he did not understand. Marcus knelt beside the torn flag and carefully picked up the pieces. His fingers traced the rips in the ancient fabric with the same gentle care he might show to an injured child. He held the pieces like they were the most precious things in the universe. The hall remained completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support system seemed muted, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. When Marcus stood up and faced Thrackmore again, something had changed in his eyes. The diplomatic mask he had worn for so many years was still there, but now there were cracks in it. And through those cracks, something else was looking out. You seem to have misunderstood something, Marcus repeated, his voice still quiet and controlled. This flag does not represent weakness. Held up the torn pieces so everyone in the hall could see them. This flag represents the fact that a species capable of splitting atoms and turning entire worlds to glass chose instead to talk. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Several aliens shifted nervously. They had heard stories about human weapons, but they had always thought of them as crude tools used by a primitive species. The way Marcus spoke about them now suggested something different. You see this as worthless cloth, Marcus continued, his diplomatic tone unchanged but somehow carrying the weight of glaciers moving across continents. But I see it as proof that beings who could burn the sky decided instead to reach for the stars. Thrackmore tried to maintain his aggressive stance, but his body was betraying him. His hands were beginning to shake slightly. His breathing was getting faster, Every instinct he possessed was telling him to run, but he could not understand why. "I have spent years in this role," Marcus said conversationally, as if he were discussing the weather. "Years being polite, being reasonable, being the good human that everyone expects me to be. And I do it gladly because that politeness prevents wars. That reasonableness saves lives. That diplomatic courtesy keeps the peace between our peoples." He paused and looked directly at Thrackmore. The young warrior felt like he was staring into the heart of a dying star. "But you have just insulted every human who ever chose restraint over destruction. Every ancestor who died so their children could build instead of burn. Every person who looked at a problem and decided to solve it with words instead of weapons." The other aliens in the hall were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something they had never seen before. They had met angry humans, aggressive humans, even violent humans. But they had never seen a human when their diplomatic mask began to slip away. Marcus was not shouting. He was not making threats. He was not even raising his voice. But the controlled, intelligent anger that radiated from him was more terrifying than any display of raw fury could have been. "Let me tell you about my species," Marcus said, and his voice carried clearly to every corner of the silent hall. "We are the children of a world that tried to kill us at every turn. We evolved surrounded by predators stronger than us, faster than us, better armed by nature than us. Do you know how we survived?" No one answered. No one could have answered. "We learned to think. We learned to plan. We learned to work together. And yes, we learned to fight. Not the simple, honest combat of warriors like you, Thrackmore. We learned to fight wars that lasted generations. We learned to build weapons that could end civilizations. We learned to hate so efficiently that we could destroy our enemies utterly, and then move on as if they had never existed." Several aliens in the crowd made small sounds of distress. They were beginning to realize that their understanding of humanity had been incomplete. "But the most important thing we learned," Marcus continued, "was when to stop." He looked around the hall, making eye contact with delegates from dozens of species. "We don't carry weapons to these meetings, not because we cannot, but because we choose not to. We speak softly and politely, not because we are weak, but because we are trying very hard to be better than what we used to be." Thrackmore was no longer smiling. The proud warrior who had destroyed the flag was gone, replaced by something that looked small and uncertain. His species prided themselves on their strength and courage. But he was discovering that there were different kinds of strength. Every human in this galaxy carries the genetic memory of a world at war, Marcus said. "We remember what it feels like when diplomacy fails. We remember what happens when talking stops and shooting starts. And we remember how much easier it is to destroy than to create." The torn flag pieces in his hands seemed to glow under the hall's lights. "So when I stand here being diplomatic, being courteous, being reasonable, I am not doing it because I have to. I am doing it because I choose to. Because every human who serves in the diplomatic corps has sworn an oath that we will always try words first. Weapons last and war never." Marcus's voice dropped even lower, but somehow became even more penetrating. "But respect, Thrackmore, is not something we beg for. It is not something we earn through submission. It is something we offer freely, and something we expect in return." The young Courteous warrior tried to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed silently like a fish drowning in air. "I want to be very clear about something," Marcus said, addressing the entire assembly but never taking his eyes off Thrackmore. "I will continue to be diplomatic. I will continue to be courteous. I will continue to work for peace between all our peoples. Nothing that has happened here today will change that." He paused, and the silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. "But I will also remember who can be trusted with that courtesy, and who mistakes it for weakness." The psychological impact on Thrackmore was complete. This was not the mindless rage of a primitive species. This was the controlled, calculating anger of a race that had invented thermonuclear weapons and then chosen to aim them at the stars instead of each other. For the first time in his life, the proud Courteous warrior understood what it meant to be truly afraid. The silence in the hall stretched on for what felt like hours, though it was probably only seconds. Thrackmore stood frozen in place, his earlier confidence completely gone. The other Courteous warriors who had stood behind him were now backing away, their own instincts telling them that their young colleague had made a terrible mistake. Marcus carefully folded the torn pieces of the flag, handling them with the same reverence he might show to a wounded friend. When he looked up again, his eyes swept across the entire gathering. "I think," he said quietly, "that we need to have a conversation about respect and understanding." He moved to stand in the center of the hall, where everyone could see and hear him clearly. The torn flag remained in his hands, but now it seemed less like a destroyed symbol and more like evidence in a trial. "Many of you have told me over the years that I represent what humanity could become if we abandoned our barbaric heritage," Marcus began. "You have praised me for being different from other humans, for being civilized, for evolving beyond my species' natural violent tendencies." Several aliens in the crowd looked uncomfortable. They recognized their own words being repeated back to them. "But I think you misunderstood something important," Marcus continued. "I am not different from other humans. I am not more evolved or more civilized. I am simply a human doing the job I was trained to do, in the way I was trained to do it." He walked slowly around the hall as he spoke, and aliens moved aside to give him room. "The human soldiers who guard your trade routes are not more violent than me. The human engineers who built the ships that brought you here are not less civilized than me. The human farmers who grow food on colony worlds are not more primitive than me. We are all the same species. We are all carrying the same history, the same capabilities, the same choices." Dr. Yaxrin raised one of his thin arms. "But Ambassador, surely you must acknowledge that you have developed beyond the typical human response to conflict?" Marcus stopped walking and looked at the scholar. "Have I? Or have I simply learned to use different tools for different situations?" He held up the torn flag. "When Thrakmor destroyed this, my first instinct was not to ask for an apology. My first instinct was to calculate exactly how much force would be required to remove his head from his shoulders." Several aliens gasped. A few took steps backward. "The fact that I did not act on that instinct does not make me more evolved," Marcus explained. "It makes me trained. Every human diplomat learns to control their responses, just as every human soldier learns to control their weapons, just as every human engineer learns to control their tools." Thrakmor finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. I did not understand." Marcus turned to face him directly. "No, you did not. But that is not entirely your fault." He addressed the entire gathering again. "We have allowed you to believe that diplomacy is weakness, that courtesy is submission, that choosing peace means being incapable of war. This was a mistake on our part." Ambassador Hulmet from the Trading Guild stepped forward nervously. "Are you saying that human diplomatic behavior is artificial?" "Not artificial," Marcus replied. "Deliberate. There is a difference." He moved back to Earth's display area, where the broken protective case and scattered pieces of metal still lay on the floor. With careful movements, he began to clean up the debris. "My species learned something very important during our early history," he said as he worked. "We learned that the strongest person in the room is often the one who chooses not to use their strength." Several aliens exchanged glances. This was not the way they thought about power and strength. When a Courteous warrior shows mercy to a defeated enemy, is he being weak? Marcus asked. Thrakmor shook his head. "No, mercy is the privilege of the strong." "Exactly. And when humans choose diplomacy over warfare, we are not showing weakness. We are showing the same kind of strength." He finished cleaning up the debris and stood up, still holding the torn flag. "But mercy must be earned through respect," Marcus continued, "and respect must be mutual. When you show contempt for the choices we make in the name of peace, you are not insulting our weakness. You are insulting our strength." The hall was completely quiet now. Even the background sounds of the station seemed muted, as if the universe itself was listening to Marcus's words. "I need all of you to understand something very clearly," he said. "Humans did not become peaceful because we are incapable of violence. We became peaceful because we are extremely capable of violence, and we learned to fear what we could do with that capability." He walked over to where Thrakmor stood and stopped just outside of arm's reach. "Your people are warriors, Thrakmor. You understand honor, courage, and strength. These are good things. But do you also understand restraint?" The young Courteous looked confused. What do you mean?" "I mean the strength to not do something you are capable of doing. The courage to choose a harder path when an easier one is available. The honor that comes from protecting others even when they do not appreciate that protection." Marcus held up the torn flag one more time. "This piece of cloth represents the moment when my species chose restraint, when we decided that our strength would be used to build rather than destroy. to protect rather than conquer, to unite rather than divide. He looked directly into Thrackmore's eyes. When you destroyed it, you were not attacking a symbol of weakness. You were attacking a symbol of the hardest choice my species ever made. Thrackmore's shoulders sagged. The proud warrior posture was completely gone now, replaced by something that looked like shame. I apologize, Ambassador Chen. I did not understand what the flag meant to your people. Marcus nodded slowly. Apology accepted, Thrackmore. But I need you to understand that this is not just about one flag or one insult. He addressed the entire gathering again. All of you need to understand that human courtesy is not submission. Human diplomacy is not weakness. Human peace is not pacifism. We offer these things freely because we choose to, not because we have to. He carefully placed the torn flag pieces in a small container he had brought for other purposes. And we will continue to offer them, because that is who we have chosen to be. But from now on, I hope you will see them for what they truly are. Gifts from a species that could have chosen differently. Dr. Yexrin spoke up again. Ambassador, will you continue to serve as our mediator in disputes? Of course, Marcus replied immediately. That is my job, and I am good at it. Nothing that happened here today changes my commitment to helping all our peoples work together peacefully. But will you continue to be patient with those who do not initially understand the value of diplomacy? Asked Silvara. Marcus smiled slightly, and for the first time since the incident began, it looked like his old diplomatic expression. I will continue to be patient with those who are learning, he said. I will continue to be courteous with those who show courtesy in return, and I will continue to work for peace with those who truly want peace. He paused and looked around the hall one more time. But I will also remember, and make note of, those who mistake kindness for weakness and diplomacy for surrender. The message was clear to everyone present. Human courtesy would continue, but it would no longer be taken for granted. As the crowd began to disperse, many aliens approached Marcus to offer their own apologies and to express their new understanding of human diplomatic behavior. The exhibition continued, but with a very different atmosphere than before. Later that evening, Marcus sat alone in his quarters, carefully working to repair the torn flag. It would never be exactly as it had been, but with patience and skill, most of the damage could be mended. As he worked, he thought about the day's events. The other species would probably treat human diplomats with more respect from now on. They would be more careful about mistaking courtesy for weakness. That was good. But Marcus also knew that respect born from fear was not the same as respect born from understanding. There was still work to do, bridges to build, and trust to earn. But that was tomorrow's challenge. Tonight he had a flag to repair and a species' reputation to rebuild. The flag would be whole again. And perhaps in time, so would the understanding between the species of the galaxy.